Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new episode of Qualia. In this episode, we have Danny Ashwin with us. We talk with him about his YouTube videos, his creative process, and his love for cycling. He takes us into topics ranging from the intricacies of Moto GP to talking about the Zen mind. From movies to books, we learned a lot from our conversation with him, and we hope you benefit from it as much as we did. So let's get started. So, Ashwin, welcome to the show. We want to give a lot of new perspectives for people to look at. And as far as we know you, you're a person who's multi talented. And we've seen you for like 3 years. And you're a really enthusiastic person when it comes to science and technology. So, tell us about yourself. Tell us about yourself in a way that we can't.
I've been doing a lot of things over the past lately. As you said, I was a curious person in regards to science and technology in the earlier times. It actually grew even more passionate when it came to certain topics over the time. I mean, I'm kind of was regarded as a weirdo. I mean, say for example, in my PG college, I was put under this weird person category where I was the only nerd kind of guy. In a perspective that you can't see me, I would be that kind of person. I don't know. You could have met people like me earlier, but
Yeah, Ashwin, like we all have been in the place tagged under the umbrella of being a nerd. So yeah, we get you and welcome to the show again. And growing up in the same city during the same period as you, I'm just like curious about knowing the choices you made right from growing up to a position in what you are doing today. Because like I recently came across this quote that life is a matter of choices and every choice we make eventually makes us who we are. So I just wanted to know the important choices you made throughout your life journey as such.
okay. As we date back to probably when I was 15, there was this choice that was put forth in front of selecting the category of groups that we are set to pick for schools. It wasn't a big matter back then, but that was probably the first biggest choice that I was presented in front. And growing onwards from that, I mean, that didn't created a big impact on whatever I did onwards. But what made a big difference was to choose a career path, either to be in engineering or to go with science and in specific terms, physics. I mean, yes, I was a curious person in terms of physics, but back in the time when I was about to complete my 12th standard, I was coming off a streak where my dad was kind of unemployed for a quite amount of time, and that made me consider these two options to either pursue engineering or to go for physics. Because on one hand, I was this person who was so much into sports, who began liking motorsports so crazy, and that is the reason why I was interested into more engineering. But then later I decided not to, due to the financial constraints that was lying ahead, and thus I planned to take up physics and choose another path. That was one of the most biggest impacting choices that I made, and following that path initially was good, but then later on, it is just like that jump when we do from standard 10 to standard 11 and consider the entire physics to be so hard. It was the same thing when I jumped from my school to college. This was a bigger jump, and then onwards, another big jump happened when my another choice was to study PG in physics again. So this was another big leap, and yeah, so then the pandemic happened, and these were the basic choices that anybody would choose over. Another choice was to start a YouTube channel recently, I mean, which by now is almost a year old. And why did I do it? Well, there are a lot of reasons I can point to. And progressing with choices, there are a lot to make. I mean, Even on the day when you wake up, you are given choices of taking up tea or coffee, but like they don't matter as much as impacting anyone else's life, right? So yeah, so far these are the big choices that I've made.
Okay. So, Ashwin, we know how curious you are. And I want to give the listeners a perspective on how curious you are, or we knew you were. Okay, listen. So, in the first year of UG, we all thought of doing some project, something called the Project Energy Box. And to think of it now, it was really naive of us to think something like that would work. And even though like 10 of us started it, eventually all of us came out of that project. But I still remember that till the middle of second year, you followed me. You used to draw models, you used to draw diagrams of how it might work, what we can do to it. And you continuously showed me like new blueprints and what are all the new ways that we can make it work. And I was like, your drawings are really intricate, man. And I want to say it here. You're a really good artist. You're a really good artist when it comes to, drawing crankshafts and stuff. And at the same time, you draw really nice portrait of people too. And all that aside, even though all of us bailed out of the project in the consecutive weeks, you kept on pursuing it for like 1 year, I guess. And I used to think, why is this guy so curious? And probably I think that that's why I have this image of curiousness laid over you. Whenever I think of Ashwin, I used to think like, okay, that guy, he's very enthused. I used to think like that. So why? Were you always this curious from your childhood?
That's a very hard question to answer, but still, yes, I grew curious ever since I was young, and I don't have any reason to blame that this is the reason why I'm so curious about this. But ever since I was growing up, around 12 or above, I used to watch a lot of TV programs and sorts where they used to explain me stuff on how they usually work, why they do things this specific way, and progressing on over time. I mean, like I used to think about if I was presented with a problem, say let's take example as if we are given a battery and if we are said not to reverse the poles, I would kind of think the opposite, and I used to imagine what might happen if we just reverse the poles. So this kind of kept on growing as time progressed, and I began to find loopholes in rules that are being set. These loopholes fixing kind of attitude developed me more curious over time, and that probably could be the nature of why I continued on that project. I began wondering like how we can do that. So this problem solving attitude in general made me more curious over the time, but still there are a little bit of caveats to throw around.
I think this curiosity definitely reflects in the content that you put on in your YouTube channel, Motorsports Tamil. Last I checked, your channel had about 850 plus subscribers, and the videos had a pretty good graphics and very engaging content. Because like I checked out your channel for researching for this episode, and to be honest, I watched. I think there are six or seven full-length videos, and I watched it straight without any breaks in between. So I think it's your curiosity reflecting content that you post on your YouTube channel, and this leads me to the next question. I just wanted to know your process on converting this idea of the video you have in your mind to something which people could watch it in a social media platform like YouTube. I just like would like you to take me through the steps, the whole process of how you pick the idea, where do you go from there to how you make the animations, like what happens when you do the voiceover and like till you finally upload it. Because I think like I heard it from Richard Curtis, co-writer of the Mr. Bean show, who said that the difference between a good idea for a movie and finished movie is same as seeing a pretty girl at a party and being there when she gives birth to your third child. It's a very, very long journey. Even though it's not the same thing as making a 3 hour movie, on watching your 10-minute long YouTube videos, it clearly shows that you have put a lot of effort in making those videos. I just wanted to know the process that goes behind creating these videos.
Rohan, the answer to that is that I've been learning making videos since from the second year of UG. Still, I was so amateurish until I was in my first year of MSc. And during the COVID lockdown, what I planned to do was to write scripts and upload as blogs about these motorsports in a platform where people could actually read about and get some knowledge about motorsports before they can watch this in general. That was the actual idea behind making this channel up. But then I planned to make them as videos by combining the skill that I learned over the course of 4 years earlier. And then the basic process actually involves the first is scripting. And while scripting, I'll ensure that there aren't any breaks, there are no repetitions, and this on itself explains the content very much well. If anybody could read my script, they might get the entire picture framed on themselves by just reading the script. And then comes the idea of illustrations. The illustrations, whichever that I don't usually have in my backup material, that I have to redo again. I mean, for example, if I'm explaining about a race car, and if I don't have an illustration of a race car, I have to do that again. And then the process involves the voiceover, where I speak and then I edit the entire audio. And this is the place where I actually usually skip off a lot of script because they seem a little bit too much of some of the jokes will be too lame to add through the content, so I just skip them off. And then once the audio is done, then comes the editing and the animation part. The animation part takes a bit of time because they basically are animations. Animations take a lot of time, where I animate the illustration work that I did earlier, and then it is pretty much the basic. I just watch it again. I hope it conveys the content that I wanted to convey, and if it doesn't, I edit it again, and then I repeat the process again, and I only upload the third or the fourth edit that has been completed and the one that is more satisfactory.
A follow-up question I have to this answer that you explained to me very illustratively is that, Ashwin, do you all do this like single-handedly, or do you collaborate with other people to finish these projects? And like, how long does each step take you to complete? I mean, like, take us through how long it takes, like, say, a 10-minute video to make the whole edit and everything.
The actual thing is, I can actually, if I put my mind through the entire video, I can actually complete it within a week. But I don't do that. I do have a lot of other works to follow up, so it takes about 3 to 4 weeks to complete a video, at around 15 to 16 minutes in length. I mean, I haven't made any video as long as 15 minutes, but that is the usual benchmark that I used to keep up. By progressing with editing and removal of stuff, the entire video length comes over to 10 minutes. So that's the basic idea of removing scripts. So starting with the scripting process, yes, I do it alone. And then I send to my friend, who kind of adds jokes if there are any possibility. But for the most case, he used to be busy, so I single-handedly do the scripting. And then the next work will be the editing. The scripting usually takes about 2 to 3 days. The audio work takes almost the same time, 2 to 3 days. I record it on a night with complete silence once noise levels actually gradually come down, and then I just mildly reduce my pitch such that it doesn't look like my own voice. And then the next process will be the illustration and the animation. This goes side by side, so it takes a little bit time. Probably it takes around a week, and then the editing process, where I keep all of the animations in the timeline, and then I watch it again. And if there are any mistakes in the animations, or if there are any mistakes in the entire timeline or the script, I polish that up in that 1 week span. If not, it might extend to a duration of 2 weeks. And since it is based on sports, I often used to verify with the rules book that the sport committee has offered. And this rules book is actually open for public to see. So that takes a little bit of time to verify with whatever I posted. And that is also a part of the process.
Okay, Ashwin, I wanted to ask you this question. When you talk about MotoGP, I don't think you localize yourself to MotoGP. You, from there, you branch into the sciences and the technology. So I would like to ask you, what is the underlying motive behind this channel? Do you really want to talk about science and you're doing videos, or do you really want to do videos about MotoGP? And moreover, I'd like to ask you, why MotoGP? In the demography that we come from, a lot of people don't watch MotoGP. And even though part of the answer to the question I asked lies in this statement, I want to know why. Are you bringing in MotoGP because you want to talk about science, or are you bringing science in because you want to talk about MotoGP and you feel that this aspect you're really confident about, or these things happen coincidentally? Like you want to talk about MotoGP and you can't evade from not talking about science because you come from a science background. So what is it, Ashwin?
So the thing is, it is actually a debatable question. I mean, you can put it one way and tell me like he did it because he likes a lot of science, and that is why he wanted to explain physics behind it. Or you can put it the other way because he likes MotoGP. He wants to explain about it. But the actual thing is, I grew up watching the sport because I don't know. This was one of the entertainment that I had back in, say, when I was 12. So at that time, I would probably haven't got science background to grow up with this category of explaining how the motorsports function. So to answer that, since I grew up watching this entire sport, I wanted to know about the technology being involved in it, and this journey that I had so far made me so passionately get involved in it such that I wanted to convey this to the entire demographic that doesn't see the entire sport. And sport in general, let's say MotoGP for an example. This sport is so much technologically oriented in a way that the technology used on the racetrack is brought into the roads or daily commute within a very short span of years. For example, if we consider the use of linkage is a component that is used to connect the entire swing arm to the body of a motorcycle. We didn't have this linkage in our high performance road motorcycles back in 2014. But if we just buy a motorcycle right now, there would be not any motorcycle without a linkage. So in this aspect, I wanted to convey how these components are being used on the racetrack as well as on the road, such that the people get a little bit of insight of how the entire technology in the motorsports community is around and how this might help people in their regular commute or regular riding, or let's say if they are so passionate about racing and they wanted to continue a career in racing, maybe they can use this knowledge to pursue on.
A quick reflection that I have to what Ashwin has answered is that there is this proverb that we have been taught from our childhood that we must not be the jack of all trades and master of none. We are always asked to master a discipline and specialize in it. But recently I came across this book called Range by David Epstein. He lays out multiple research studies and gives examples from daily life as to why humans must learn through a range of disciplines. He tells that in this era, in this age, the modern science is getting very difficult, and it's the need of the heart to apply ideas from across disciplines. So I think Ashwin, in a way, uses his knowledge of physics with his knowledge of MotoGP, which makes Ashwin's content on his YouTube channel as creative and as original as possible.
So Ashwin, think about the varied interests that you propose. You have interest in hard sciences, purest of sciences, and then you have interest in technology. I mean, like people who are doing science, if you ask them, they used to have this really, not everyone, but a lot of people, including myself. When I was really focused on science, I used to think of technology like more of a byproduct which has turned out to be really useful than the original product that we were doing. And moreover, you do science, you do technology, and you've told me that you're trying to apply for a PhD abroad too. So you're not giving up on your science, and you keep yourself informed about the technology and everything that revolves around it, and you take Moto GP, you do cycling. I'd like to ask, how are you this varied? I mean, like, you belong to one demography, and if you had told me that you are a function of what your society is, I would have definitely been skeptic, because you're a lot of things, man. So this is what I'd like to ask you: how did you come up with such varied interests, and how do you find the time and energy to pursue it?
It's a complex question to answer in the first place. So, yes, I belong to a very limited demographic of people. I mean, if we just take up the entire Instagram for an example, there are, there will be like probably 10 to 15% of Formula One fans in the entire Instagram database. And, yes, I belong to that very specific people. And then if we just consider the group of people who do cycling, yes, that will be somewhere around even lesser than 5%. And then, yes, I belong to that too. And yes, the interest for it grew up with the community of friends that I had. Let's say, for example, I had this friend named Harish who used to actually own very expensive bicycles, which was one of the reasons why I was interested in cycling. And at the same time, I had a friend who used to watch a lot of sports, but still, it wasn't motorsports, but still, the interest that he had towards sports made me watch one that was so unique. And in that regards, it was the kind of entertainment that I grew up watching. The time that I usually spend, 20% on watching motorsports in a day, 50% of doing all the course that I usually used to do, and then in a regular day before the pandemic, there used to be another 10% that we spend on cycling. I mean, that I spend on cycling. So yes, this all developed into an entire habit, and this habit kind of followed on with the days that are going over, and that probably answers the question of why I have an energy to maintain every schedule that I actually have.
And there is this thing which has fascinated me about athletes who take up things like marathon and stuff. And you've gone on a lot of cyclothons. I want to ask you this question. What do you think? What runs in your mind when you are pushing your body really, really beyond the limits? What do you think? I myself haven't participated in any marathon or cyclothons. So this question has been baffling me for a really long time now. So I'd like to know what goes on in your mind. What makes you want to finish the race, and what is the incentive to push your body beyond the limits? What is the incentive to punish yourself to do something?
So the thing with cyclotron, the first thing, it's completely boring. I mean, it's literally boring from the start. The only interesting part of cyclothons are the finishes. But still, if you just miss out the start because it's boring, you will not have a proper finish in the end anyways. But still, pushing your body to the limit is kind of, it makes you feel alive, come alive in a moment which only sports can explain. There's this movie called Ford vs Ferrari where the lead actor, he just says, when you go so fast, your view expands in a way that you see entire thing in that very perspective. Just like that, when you are pushing yourself beyond the limit that you are actually provided with, you don't basically have any other worries other than finishing your race. It gives you immense concentration to just pursue for the rider ahead of you. It's just like we are writing a competitive exam and we just are trying to know more, and we are just forcing our brain with information overload. It's just like that, but here what we use is ourselves, is our physical body, and in that regards, the spirit of competition gives you a little bit push, I guess. And the rewards, yes, they are very not so satisfying, but still, the satisfaction comes from being participating in it. And in one of the races where I won, even though the award was so simple, the satisfaction of winning a race actually compensates for pushing yourself beyond that limit.
I have a kind of a follow-up question to this. I know that you used to take 60, 70 kilometers ride and even used to participate in long professional bicycle rides that went up to 100 kilometers. Yeah, I know that's insane. And as an amateur cyclist myself, cycling to me always felt like a getaway from actual life and helped me think through problems which I was facing at that particular time. So what goes through your mind when you cycle, especially during those long stretches? Like, I'm just curious to know as to what do you think, because the Indian road conditions do not even allow you to wear your headphones while cycling. So you don't even have the option of listening to a music or podcast while riding a cycle. So what goes on your mind?
There's this concept called the Zen mind, where your mind is of actually two parts. The one part, it just keeps on thinking even if you just want to not think about anything. The other part is actually listening to whatever that is being played on the other mind. So the thing is, the chattering mind, it just keeps on thinking whatever you went through so far. And basically that is like, I used to think about a lot of things, like what will I do when I just get back home? Will I sketch? Will I just have a shower? Or will I just change a little bit of measurements on my bicycle to make my next ride more improving? Or will I just go to the next bicycle shop in the next stop to make some adjustments? Or where will be the next energy station? But still, the thing that I listen to will, I mean, like, not physically listening. The second mind that listens to whatever the chatter that goes on in the primary mind will be like, focus on the ride and cover the next kilometer within the appointed time, which will be basically for to maintain an entire average speed, because maintaining an average speed is primarily very important for a cyclist who is training for a cyclothon event. And during the events, it will be only on the focus of getting the next rider or finishing the checkpoints. I mean, like reaching the checkpoints within the appointed time.
Ashwin, before we move to the final question, kind of like this rapid fire. So, like just 5 questions. Just answer them on the go.
Okay.
So, what's your favorite movie?
La La Land?
La La Land. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's your favorite musician, Ashwin? And I'm asking this because I know the answer.
Musician in the sense, a person whom I know, or, I mean, like, that's actually a complex question to answer because I have a lot of people to
Who's
keep
the
up.
first person that comes to your mind?
Let's keep John
Good.
Mayer.
See, this is why I asked you the question. Okay, next. Would you go on a one-way trip to Mars or you'd rather stay on Earth?
I'd stay on Earth. No, I won't
Okay,
go to
good.
Mars anyway. I mean, if it was
Do you?
both the ways, I
Yeah,
would probably go to Mars, but still, it's just, if it's one way, I have to think about the people I have here.
that's good. And which is your favorite book?
This is an autobiography. It was written by Adrian Newey. It's called How to Build a Car. It explains about how he grew up in life, being an aerodynamicist, developing race cars for the racetrack.
Okay. And the final question. Do you believe that our civilization would survive probably the next century?
That's actually debatable, but I think we can, because at the moment our technology has saved a lot of lives from having a very shorter lifespan. So far we have lived the longest, and thus I think we can. But if there are any inevitable circumstances, like, I mean, we never expected COVID to happen. So if there could be any circumstances like that, maybe we can't. That's debatable, but I think in my perspective, we can.
So you don't think that we are going to kill each other?
We might, but I hope that we won't.
But you think it's highly unlikely to happen?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, so Ashwin, we are in the final part now.
Okay.
Now, there is a reason we called you on the show to be a guest. Of course, you're a really talented person, but apart from all that, there is a secret agenda behind this. And it's not a secret anymore if I'm going to say that. And Ron, would you like to say why we called Ashwin specifically?
Because to be honest, we don't know a better person, at least in our circle, who has interest as varied as you, Ashwin. So that's the reason we called you, and we knew that you were passionate about things and you could give us perspective about those things. So yeah, your perspectives on things that you're passionate about is the reason why we called you, because Qualia as a podcast, we wanted to tell our own subjective experience of the world around us. That's what Qualia means. But we understood while making the first 10 episodes of the show that our perceptions are limited, and we want to widen this perception by bringing people like you into the show. So thank you, Ashwin, for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Pradeep.
It's been really great talking to you, and I'm pretty sure the listeners would feel the same. You've educated us and you've enlightened us on a lot of topics that we wanted to talk with you about. It has been really informative and it has been really good catching up with you, my old friend. So, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for taking me as a guest. And to all the listeners of Qualia, just keep going. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Qualia. We have a lot of great conversations lined up for you in the future episodes, so stay tuned. And do send us your valuable feedback so that we could make Qualia a better listening experience for you. You could always reach out to us on Instagram at pod_qualia or send us mail at pod.qualia@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to us and we hope you have a great day.